Online for Authors. I'm chatting with Jane Hartsock, author of Fan Base. Welcome, Jane.
Hi, thank you for having me on. I'm really happy to be here.
I am super excited to have you. I loved the book. I was kind of amazed. I don't know what I was expecting, but that wasn't it, and I loved it. But before we dive in, can you kind of give the listeners an idea of what they're going to find when they open up the cover of Fan Base?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what readers will find depends a little bit on what they're looking for. I wrote the book to be just a really fun beach read for spring break or for summer, vacations. And I think you can read it on that level, just like it's a good time. It's a roller coaster. But if you are looking for something with a little bit more substance, I think you'll also find that. So as I was writing, I started realizing that I had some things to say about social media, about celebrity culture, about the 90s and those of us who grew up in that time. So if you want to kind of sink your teeth into something a little bit more substantive, I think you'll find that as well.
Absolutely. So it's kind of listed as a psychological thriller, right? But It's got a lot of other elements to it, because when I first started reading it, I thought I was getting a romance. Like I didn't look at all. I just picked up the book and started reading.
Fun.
And so, it kind of starts out romancy,
Mm-hmm.
and you feel like, oh, I'm not in a romance. So, so it was really great. What made you say, oh, psychological thriller, that's what I'm going to write?
So, I think that's really interesting. One of the freedoms of being a self-published author is that you don't have to be really constrained too much by genre norms. I would not call this a category romance. It satisfies romance in only the most remote technical way.
Right.
Which I won't say anything about because I don't want to give away.
No, right.
But one of the nice things about being a self-published author is that you can play around a little bit with genre. And I think I decided on it being, sort of psychological, domestic drama, just because it had the most things in common with that category. But it definitely crosses into, and I think one of the things that's listed as on Amazon is like sisters fiction.
Yes.
So
you're like, okay.
Okay, that's a thing. I think that's really kind of a fun thing about writing these days and about writing as a self-published author, that you can kind of play around with those conventions a little bit.
Yeah, I really, really like that. And a lot of the authors that I'm speaking with now are doing this kind of genre bending stuff where it's along the romance line, but they're also adding in all of these elements, or crazy things put together like historical fiction and fantasy and other things that I don't think 20 years ago publishers would have allowed.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's really fun. I was at a conference a couple of years ago that Diana Gabaldon was at from Outlander, and she was talking about the controversy she had with her publisher or editor or somebody when they were trying to decide how to genre Outlander. And she was really upset that they were going to genre it as a romance. She thought it was not. She wanted it categorized as historical fiction until she found out that romance sells about 10 times as many books a year. And then she's like, that's fine. It's fine.
That's fine. We'll do it your way. Yeah.
But I think, now you don't have to worry about so much the actual physical shelf in a bookstore.
Right.
And so, the keywords that people use to search for books that they're interested in, or even the way algorithms kind of funnel you along, if you like this, you might like that, is just not so dependent on that stuff anymore. Absolutely.
Given that, when you were writing it, did you have a genre in mind, or did you just write the story?
I just wrote the story. When I sat down, this was I shouldn't say necessarily a strange book for me to write, because I've only written, 3 technically, but I had the beginning in mind, and I had the twist in mind, and I had the end in mind. But I didn't really have much of the middle stuff until I really just sat down and started writing. And it seemed to me, as I was getting into sort of Babs's grief and questions that seemed to be sort of like, what is what is her reality? What is real? What is true? What is she seeing? What is she hearing? What is being manipulated around her? That those were largely psychological elements. They weren't quite thriller. They weren't, certainly they weren't romance, sort of front and center. So that the genre came later. It sort of announced itself as I was writing.
Right. I think that's happening a lot with people too, because you have to come up with something to market it, but you don't have to come up with it while you're writing it.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's like, okay, now I have it. What are we going to call it? How are we going to do this? When I said it started out kind of like a romance, it's because, she meets someone that she once had a thing with, and they meet again. And so it does kind of, when you're first reading the first few pages, you do kind of get this, it's going to be like one of those, meet the guy and they're going to get back together and the whole thing. And then twists start happening. Did you intend for it to have that romantic kind of element in it? Like, I'm wondering, it's not that you confused me. I don't mean that, but just, I can't quite explain what I'm saying, except that it changed. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you're going along, and I really did feel like I was going to have a romance. And then it was like, wait a minute, this isn't quite it's not a romance at all. Did you do that on purpose? Or is that just as you're writing, it was like, this is the way it has to be?
Well, sort of, I mean, I guess a little bit both. More, this is the way it has to be, right? Like, so there's this kind of, there's just this attraction between Austin and Babs. And then there's this sort of unresolved question for her about, like, what would have happened if I'd taken this other road,
right?
And for him as well, right? I mean, that's a big part of the book too, is that, like, okay, he went down the celebrity path, and what if he'd done something more domestic? And she went down the domestic path, and what if she'd done this thing that was just maybe sort of slightly more adventurous? And so I think the nature of that relationship lends itself to romance and attraction and, some sexy stuff.
Right.
But I wanted the sort of like twist in it. Like, I didn't want it to be a happy, cute little romance. And there are some really great books out there that are this kind of celebrity normal pairing, and they're just fantastic. And I've had some fun, reading them, but I did want this to be a little bit darker. I think that question of celebrity that exists so prominently right now it is worth kind of thinking about. What is the dark side of that? What is the really dysfunctional kind of parasocial side of that? So, yeah.
So, and this won't give anything away, but Austin Lewis, so he used to be like the teen heartthrob. Things have gone a little sideways for him, where he's no longer, the big guy, but there are some super fans that have just kept up with him, and they call themselves the Lunatics because his last name is Lewis and it's spelled lunatics as in Lewis. I'm curious, to get into the heart of that. Did you get on any like super fan groups and things like that and just kind of like discover what they were doing on them?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to name names just because I don't want to get in trouble with it.
No. But talk to us a little bit about that experience in a super fan environment and what you saw.
So I used primarily Instagram and Tumblr to see kind of like, where do these conversations sort of start and then get kind of a little bit more than probably what's healthy. And Facebook a little bit too, although a lot of that stuff is not, it's moved off of Facebook and it's on Instagram and some other sort of like random little weird twists and turns. And I am a child of, I was born in the 70s, and my teen years were predominantly in the 90s. And so I had some very specific sort of heartthrobs that I recall there being like a lot of teen intensity around. And I looked to see kind of like who's following them now, how many followers do they have, which ones have really sort of broken out and like they have an adult career, and which ones are still sort of like, struggling and or not really struggling. I mean, some of them are quite happy, right? Like this is my happy family and we're doing great things. And then I can't remember at what point one of the actors from Dawson's Creek died. Well, sort of either during the writing of this or slightly after that. And I started to see like, there was like a GoFundMe to help his family in the financial aftermath of that event. And it just became very clear to me that not all of these people have weathered the celebrity storm.
Right.
The consequences of it actually can be really, really paralyzing and significant. And then those little ecosystems of fans, some of them are super supportive and they're just sort of like, oh my gosh, this is so fun to, and then others are really not healthy, right? Like it's a lot of sort of catty remarks and correcting other people in the group because they didn't know this thing or that thing. And so anyway, I found that a sort of fun, interesting little way of doing research, quote unquote research for the book. But yeah, I did dive into some particular, 90s nostalgia fandoms.
Right. And I can imagine that you saw some things that you said were heartwarming, and then some others that it's like, oh my gosh, they actually know what kind of toothpaste he uses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Or like these little spin-offs where somebody starts doing this deep dive analysis into some relationship that somebody had like 25 years ago. Like, I'm not thinking about the people I was dating 25 years ago. Why are you thinking about the people this celebrity was dating 25 years ago? Like,
right.
So that kind of thing was, interesting little ecosystem.
I am sure. Did you have to do any other research for the novel?
Oh, I'm trying to think. Did I do any other research? Oh, well, I'm not a patent attorney.
Yeah.
I am an attorney, but I didn't ever practice patent law. So I had to look into a little bit of sort of like, and I won't say too much about this, but like how do copyrights work? And then I'm also not a corporate attorney, so I had to look into sort of how do corporations kind of exist in this sort of celebrity world, a little bit of that. And then I had lived in Chicago for like 11 years. Okay. So I know that city, I could get through that city with my eyes closed. So not a ton of research. The book I'm working on now actually is a book that I have to do like some real research on and, like read a book, write a chapter, read a book, write a chapter. But this went a little bit more quickly. Yeah.
All right. Did you have a favorite character when you were writing?
Oh, for sure. Margot.
Yeah.
Margot was so fun to write. She was so fun.
Talk about why her personality was one that was fun to write.
So I like her because she just has no filter. Yeah. Like if she's thinking it, she's saying it. And that makes her a complicated character in some ways. Like she's not quote unquote likable.
Right.
And I got some interesting feedback from beta readers about her. I think they were worried that I, as the author, didn't like her and wanted other people to not like her. And mostly what I wanted was for people to really feel like this relationship between these two sisters is kind of thorny.
Yeah. It's fraught with a lot of extra things.
Yeah.
Right. And
they're not very much like each other. But they're pretty loyal to each other. Like they've been through a lot. And so, I thought Margot was fun to write. She has good one-liners, and those were fun. And one of the things I really like is the ending. And I won't say too much why, about that, but I really like where the relationship between those two sisters ends.
Right. Which is probably why it's called sisters fiction too, is because the two really are, they're very central. That relationship between them is very central through the entire story. Whether things are going well or whether they're not.
Right.
It's a very central theme.
Right.
I think, I agree with you. Writing a character that doesn't have a filter is a lot of fun because it allows you, those things that come into your own mind that you would never say out loud.
Yeah.
You know, you can let your character do it. And it's kind of fun because it's like, whoo, I wonder what that would be like if I could be that way. I wouldn't want to be that way. I really wouldn't. but there's a little piece of me that maybe would like to be that way sometimes.
Yeah.
You know?
I think we all kind of have that. The nice thing about being a writer is that you can kind of explore those little
Yeah.
facets. I once heard somebody asked a writer, are you this main character?
Right.
And her response was, I'm all the characters.
Yeah.
Right. Little pieces of you and everything.
Well, that's the way I feel. I feel like I'm in all of my characters. And sometimes it's the way I am or the way I used to be. Sometimes it's even the way I wish I was.
Right.
Or the way I hope I never will be, but sometimes I fear that I am, those like, how people say, oh, I never want to be my mother, but you realize at some point that the words that just came out of your mouth were your mother's words.
Mm-hmm.
You hurt yourself, right? Well, I think that happens as characters too, is sometimes it's like, oh, I would never want to be this character, except that I am sometimes, aren't I?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally.
That's a lot of fun. So tell us a little bit about your writing life. Are you a pantser? Are you a plotter? Do you write every day? How does that look for you?
Yeah, I would say that I am a pantser, and definitely was for this novel. Like I sat down with, the sort of vague idea in my head for this novel and just like drafted the manuscript in like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And it needed a lot of help after that, but it was definitely pantsing. I didn't plot very much. I have found, as I sort of continue to write, that different books require different things.
Yeah.
And so I would still say, like, there's no plotter in the world who would look at me and say, yeah, that woman is a plotter. Like, so I'm not on that. But I do, like, some books require a lot of attention to structure and kind of like the beats and things like that. So, but this one did not as much as maybe. So like the book I'm working on now, I find myself making little notes in the manuscript that are sort of like that I'm writing toward, and that's kind of how I approach the plotter versus pantser kind of.
Right.
But I do write every day. I make a point to write for at least an hour every day, usually from 9 to 10 at night, because that's just when things have kind of calmed down from the day. But yeah, I write every single day. I have had some times where I've gotten kind of off of that beat. And then it takes so much time to get back into it that it's very inefficient. It's much more efficient to just have a bad day where your writing doesn't go well for an hour than to take, for me anyway, than to take a week off and then try to get back into the rhythm.
Okay. So you and I are different there. We're both pantsers, but I call myself a binge writer. Oh. So I will sit down and it hits me and I'll write, and I might write all day. I might write all day for 4 or 5 days in a row. And then I might not write at all for a week or two, or, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I know what I want to do again. And I start writing some more. So I would not recommend my method to anyone. A binging pantser is really not what I recommend. But it works for me. And so, and I think that's the main thing, is finding the rhythm that suits who you are and how you write.
I was just going to say that, there's no bad method. There's only the method that doesn't work for you.
Right.
Right. And so whatever works for you is the way you should be writing, probably.
Have you ever tried writing from an outline?
Well, no, not really. I have a book that I'm working on that is finished with a colleague of mine that's nonfiction.
Okay.
And that really was an outline, like really very,
Nonfiction often is, because it's kind of like you've got these facts and how are you going to put them and in what order so that you can make this thing flow. Yeah.
It just makes it intelligible and almost even like possible. Right.
Right.
I can't imagine pantsing a biography, but
no.
But there is a friend of mine in my writing group who is absolutely an outliner, and I mean, like, chapter to chapter, this is what's going to be in this chapter. This is what's going to be in this chapter. And I have never done anything that is quite that structured, and I don't think it would work for me.
No, I tried writing from an outline, and I didn't get, I couldn't even get the first chapter out. my mind was just like, no, we're not doing this. I can't do this. And so then I tried something a little less structured. There's the Save the Cat Writes a Novel.
Yes.
Have you ever read that one?
Yeah.
And so I tried to follow along with it because it's more general.
Mm-hmm.
But even it, I would get to a certain count and then I would start to panic because I still have things to say, and Save the Cat says I should be doing the next thing. And I'm not ready to do the next thing yet. And then it just doesn't work for me.
Well, I think even with the kind of like what I'll say is very loose outlining I do, where I kind of, maybe plot a couple of 4 or 5 beats ahead. By the time I get into like the third of those beats, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to go in this direction. And so like, what was the point?
Right. Right. And I think that happens to me too. Not only do I say, but my characters will say that. I mean, and I know it makes me sound like a complete lunatic, but my characters will say to me, we are not participating in that.
Yeah, you do. I mean, I find that even with everything that I've written, there's been a sort of a scene that I've imagined or even that I've written out of order. And by the time I come up to it, I'm like, that is just, nope, she wouldn't do that.
Right, because you now know the characters so much better. And the character is like, no, we're not going there with you. We're not going to do that. Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about editing, because as a pantser, I find that compared to my friends who spend a lot of time in the outline stage before they start writing, that I have a lot more editing to do than they do.
Yeah.
But I get to my editing phase long before they do because they spend so much time on the front end.
Yeah.
So how about you? Where do you fall in the editing?
So I have kind of 2 approaches to editing, and I'll say I actually really like editing. I enjoy that process of kind of going back and sort of like looking at things. I am the kind of writer who edits as I go. Okay. And I know that is like a no-no in writing, but I do it anyway. So what I will do is I'll kind of write until I get stuck, and then I'll go back maybe to the start of the chapter or sometimes even to the start of the novel, and I'll start editing to read through to kind of get momentum into the next section. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of works well for me. And then when the manuscript is done, I usually either usually at some point there's a really big revision, which I don't even think qualifies as editing. That's like I'm rewriting it based on beta reader feedback or my critique group feedback. And then I usually do a much finer kind of edit where I almost am going like sentence by sentence and thinking kind of aesthetically, like, is there a way that this sentence could be crafted better language? Is it too long? Is it not long enough? Does the rhythm of it not quite hit with the sort of rest of the book? And so, I'm kind of doing both of those things, editing as I go, and then at the very end, going back into it and looking at things much, much more closely. But that first draft, I think, like most pantsers, is like, just get the story out, just get it out on the page.
Well, I love the way that you said you vomited it out, and I call it word vomit all the time. Yeah. I mean, it's just what it is. It's me getting the story out of my head.
Yep.
So that I can now fix it and make it so that someone else would be willing to read it. Because that first draft, I'm not showing it to anyone. I'm not showing it to a beta reader. I'm not showing it, like they do not get to see that, because at that stage, I'm not worried about wordsmithing, and I'm not worried about the fact that, I wrote 8 paragraphs in a row and every sentence started with, she. Like, I don't care, because that's not what this is about. This is about getting the main pieces of the story out. And then I sit and look and say, okay, all the main pieces are here, but is this really where I want to start the story?
Yeah.
Like
absolutely.
Maybe this isn't where we need to start. And, I've got all this background stuff, which we need, but we don't need it here. Pull that out. And so there's a lot of that goes on. And then I will finally start letting people maybe take a look at it. But yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of that with Fanbase. I reordered chapters in Fanbase where I was like, well, this should come later. Actually, I kind of like this scene, and I'm going to put it, in this place instead of that place. And
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's interesting. Like I said, I have one friend in particular who writes all her beats down. She has a big bulletin board and it's all placed up there. and she knows what her story's going to do. And at the end of her first draft, she can let beta readers read it. And it's like, there's no way. But I feel like what I do is just opposite of her. I get my story out and then I find all the beats and I rearrange pieces until it works.
Yeah.
And she just does the work on the other end.
It was kind of funny with fan base because I wrote it so quickly. And then I was like, this isn't so bad. I kind of wonder what would happen with this. And I sent it, I queried it like really early, too early.
Yeah.
I queried it and I got a request for a full or a request for a partial or something like that. And the agent emailed back, and the only comment she made was, this is not fully baked yet. And I thought, okay, I kind of know that. But it was helpful feedback. And I sent then that to an alpha reader that I really like. And she gave me almost like little, like more here, more there, that sort of thing. And so the original draft was something like 75,000 words and the final draft was like 105,000 words. So it really changed a lot, I think, between that initial vomit draft and the final edit.
Right. I think that happens. I think it happens with all authors. There's a lot of changing, but I think the further along the Pantser scale you are, the more that first draft is really, really kind of ugly.
Yeah.
And then you have to go back in and say, okay, what does this need to make it an actual novel as opposed to just a bunch of words?
I think the interesting part about that is really getting to know yourself, as a writer, which is a process I guess I'm still in, and maybe we're all always in. But even as I'm writing, my sort of hour a day or maybe a little bit more, if I can scrape some time to do that, I have a sense now that I'm writing of like, these are very low stakes. I just need to get these words on this page. Right. And I think I've heard other people talk about like putting sand in the sandbox that you'll, build from later, and just get it on the page. And this can all be fixed later. And I don't pay attention to like, the words that we all have that we lean on. Mine is like certainly. Yeah. I do a little bit of that kind of sort of. I don't worry about that stuff. I just get the story out. And then that revision process that's where the real heavy lifting is. And I kind of just enjoy that process. So it works well.
For me, I write and then I put it away. And then a couple of weeks later, I'll pull it out and I read it without doing anything to it, unless I see like a huge error, but I just read it and I take notes. And the notes are things like, I'm going to need more here. I'm going to need something here. I don't like the way this starts. Ooh, I brought up this, but I probably need to have prefaced that someplace earlier. So I'll write down, need to say something about her Italian heritage before chapter 17. And I have all of these notes, and then I let it sit again for a week or two. And then I go through those notes, and that's when I start doing all of my writing.
That's really cool. So I tend to put it away. I mean, I think you have to, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know how you would go straight through it. I mean, I have to have time to back away from it so that I come at it a little fresher.
Well, you even want to have forgotten it a little bit, right?
Yes.
And you can spot the continuity errors if there are some, and you're like, oh, whoops, I completely forgot to introduce this character.
Yes, right.
Oh, look, now they're holding a coffee cup.
It's like, wait a minute, she put the coffee cup down and now she has it again. What happened? Yeah.
So I do think that's helpful to put it away for a while, but I'm curious about that with the putting notes in and then putting that away and coming back to it. I like that.
For me, I think it helps because if I start reading it now, so essentially I'm reading through it and I am trying to fix it at the same time, I get caught up again.
Yeah.
And this way, if I'm just taking notes and I take them in a notebook with a pen, which is not how I write, I definitely type when I write. And so it's like it divorces me from that. And I'm just taking these notes of what do I see that are the big problems? Where are the big issues? What things, like, oh, I didn't do enough detail here. I gave too much backstory here. And I'm just writing these kinds of things down. And I do chapter 1 and I have all my notes, and chapter 2 and I have all my notes. Then when I finally go back to it again, I'm working from these notes, and it helps keep me kind of grounded in these are the problems that I found when I was going through
That's
it.
really smart. I should think about that. Because I mean, if even just in a Word document, it's easy to put little comments on the side.
Yes, absolutely. So however you do it, but for me, my problem is that if I'm putting it into the Word document, I'm going to start fixing in the document. I know me. So I just don't let myself do that, but that's crazy. Tell us a little bit. You've mentioned next books. Tell us a little bit about what's coming up next.
Yeah. So I have a biography coming out. I spent my whole day formatting the citations in the bibliography to that. And that is coming out probably in late 2027, early 2020, something in 2027 probably. And that is a biography of the father-daughter team who were the first English language translators of an ancient Egyptian medical text. And they were really eccentric people, and they were really fun to research and write about. And so that's probably coming up next. And then I found, particularly with Fanbase, that I like to kind of have 2 novels going that I can toggle between. Like if I get really frustrated or bored with one, I'm like, I can't make this work. I can go work on the other one, and I feel sort of productive. And then it maybe frees me up in my brain, and I can come back. Right. So I have two novels going on right now, both of them still, I think, in that psychological fiction space. I like it there. I like kind of playing around with what people are thinking and how they're, that question of sort of how much of your reality do you know is real and true. And so both of the books that I'm working on have to do with that. So one of them is a book about a woman who finds out that her college professor husband has been accused of sleeping with a student, and she has to decide whether she believes him when he says that he didn't. And then the second book is a book about a young girl who presents to a hospital claiming to be one of the witches hanged at Salem.
Ooh, that sounds interesting. I love that. When you come to the point that those are being published, reach out to me again. We'll have to talk.
Absolutely. I absolutely will.
Okay. So Jane, if someone wanted to get up with you, talk with you about Fanbase, talk with you about the books coming up, what's the best way to do that?
So Instagram is a great way to reach me. I am at Write Jane Write on Instagram. And then my email address, if people wanted to reach out and email me, is hartsockj@gmail.com. I'm pretty responsive and happy to talk with people, and I'm pretty active on social media. So that's a good place to reach me.
Super. And guys, I'll have all of that in the show notes so that it's easy for you to reach out. Run out, grab yourself a copy of Fanbase. You're going to love it. When you've read it and you love it, make sure that you review it, because as authors, we desperately need those reviews, right? And Jane, I want to thank you so much for being with me today. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. This was a really fun conversation.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.